that, I grant myself an unlimited amount of time because this is an interesting topic for me, and I'm actually very pleased that you're here with us today. Thank you. I'm going to revisit what you had said about the weapons, and I know there's no way to track weapons you don't have your hands on. In other words, you don't have serial numbers. We can't track numbers that we don't know. With that said, we've had our weapons, you know, the M4A1 carbine has been seen in the hands of Hamas and Pakistani militants over in Kashmir. I'm sure it's in other places. In your opinion, and this is all theorized, but this is based on an education. You're probably one of the more educated people on this topic. Where else could those weapons come from other than Afghanistan? I mean, we have pretty tight controls on the other weapons that we've disseminated throughout the world. Where else could they be coming from other than the mass weapons storages that we had in Afghanistan?
Well, I mean, I hate to say that. There is another conflict going on in Ukraine, and
Certainly.
we're shipping weapons like crazy over there. I don't know if those weapons are the same kind. I don't really know. I mean,
so on that topic, I happen to be an expert on that topic.
Oh.
I've been over to Ukraine. I've seen the tracking and the serialization at nausea. With the scanning process, they have an account for every single serialized weapon and munition, for that matter. So I'm pretty sure we have pretty good accountability there. So where else could it come from?
well, just the difference. I know the DoD has been looking in Ukraine, and there are some questions about how good a job we're doing, but hopefully it's improved. Afghanistan is a likely place. It was a weapons bazaar before, and it's a weapons bazaar probably now. I don't see any change. The only difference is the government isn't cooperating. They at least used to cooperate with us, the prior Ghani regime, but it was a total weapons bazaar. Equipment. Now, you're assuming all the equipment that the Taliban has, they got after they kicked the Ghani government out. The Taliban, I mean, we were getting information that the Taliban basically told their people, don't buy weapons, we're getting it already from the Ghani regime. Yeah. So there was a lot of weapons flowing out before the collapse of the Ghani government.
Excellent point. As a matter of fact, when you mentioned the $7 billion that the Taliban got their hands on, that's just the tip of the iceberg, because most of the weapons actually came from the Afghani government that were basically handed over without a fight.
Sure.
It was turned over. That's part of the botched withdrawal that we did.
Or stolen beforehand. I mean, we did that chapter and verse on audits about how horrible the accounting was. And DoD's accounting of weapons was just horrible in Afghanistan. So I hope it's improved in Ukraine. I haven't looked. It's not my job.
Couldn't agree with you more. As a matter of fact, I was there in 2016, and the interpreters used to talk about this all the time, how there was a severe lack of accountability, not just on weapons, but on vehicle parts, sending the wrong parts, oversight in general, and accountability. Once you point out something with your cigar or IG, and I want to point it, by the way, for the uneducated public, in an attempt to educate them on the difference between an IG and a cigar. And if you could just kind of break this down, in your experience, did your office receive special hiring authorities from Congress, and how that differentiates between the IG and the cigar? If you could explain that real briefly.
Oh, yeah. We were given that authority because we're a temporary agency. So we have special authorities for pay and special authorities. And when we go out of existence, we go out of existence. Our employees, they're on a contract, an annual contract, or a little bit, I think 13 months, so they can get health benefits. But that's the benefit of having a special IG. We're temporary. I'm a firm believer in temporary agencies.
And it also has a little more authority, if I understand correctly.
We can look at the whole of government, and that's important. And I've talked about this before in relationship to other places in the world. That's a really helpful situation where you can follow everybody's money. The problem is the DoD IG, let's say, can only look at DoD programs. Aid IG can only look at aid programs. State can only look at state. And it's the same thing with Homeland Security and all that. You gave us the authority to look at any U.S. dollars spent in Afghanistan on reconstruction. and by any agency. So we looked at the FAA, we looked at the FDIC, we looked at every agency, and they all, there's common themes. You know, if they're stealing from one U.S. government agency, they're stealing from another. And they're also stealing from the money given to the UN. So you allowed us to look at the UN, the World Bank, and all that, which was a fantastic opportunity. I firmly believe in whole of government and whole of governments. And you really need to have somebody able to look at that.
As do I, and that's why I put an IG in the provisions for the Ukraine.
Oh, did you? Oh,
yes,
good.
I did. So I'm
Thank
happy
you.
about that.
Congratulations. It's not us, but I think that's a good point to do.
Now, when we look at Afghanistan as it exists now, we could probably agree there's terrorist training bases there, correct?
Yes.
I think around 27 is the last count I heard. I don't know if, you know.
I think so. I think the UN gave 27. I think
That's what I've heard also. And the fact that we're still giving money to a regime that, as you said, and I quote from an earlier statement, thieves don't advertise what they steal. They probably also don't advertise what they spend their money on. Would you agree on that too?
Correct.
Okay, so I can safely assume that if you're harboring 27 terrorist bases and you've done things complicit with terrorist activities, that you're probably, some of that money that we're literally sending to the Taliban could, in fact, be used to support these training facilities.
You're absolutely correct, and that's a concern we have.
I want to let that sink into the American public. American taxpayer dollars that we work for and we give to the American government semi-willingly are being used to fund terrorist bases, training people to attack Americans and their interests around the world. I want that to sink in.
Well, sir, we haven't documented that. We've documented
Let's just
everything.
say that it's a clear possibility.
Clear possibility, and that's the distinction between
The fact that we allow that possibility to exist is far beyond egregious. But, well, I'll leave it at that because you and I agree on this.
Yeah. But I could say that's the distinction between the theft and diversion of the prior regime. That usually just went to corrupt officials, and it may have ended up in Northern Virginia or California where they invested their money, or Dubai, but we were pretty certain it wasn't going to terrorist organizations. That's the problem. That's the concern. I said in my statement that this group are a bunch of terrorists, and so very likely it's going to end up the money being diverted to terrorism.
Yeah, so we went from corrupt to evil. Great. As you stated in your this is my last question, but I think it's very germane to what we're trying to cover today. You stated to the House Committee on Oversight and Accountability the Biden administration has not at all been helpful to you in your investigations, and you said in your testimony, and I quote, "Due to the refusal of the state and USAID to fully cooperate with SIGAR, I cannot report to this committee or to the American people on the extent to which our government may be funding the Taliban and other nefarious groups with U.S. taxpayer dollars. We simply do not know, since the Department of State, USAID, the UN, and other agencies are refusing to give us basic information that we or any other oversight body would need to ensure safe stewardship of tax dollars," which supports what we were just talking about. What can Congress do to reverse that trend and bring back accountability for the very dollars that we're responsible for and, indeed, the safety of our country?
Well, I mean, as I mentioned to somebody else who asked the question is, I mean, you know, a formal letter from the committee, a bipartisan, you know, because that sends a bigger message. Bipartisan letter saying, please, you know, or provide the information. I don't know if you can do that. That's helped in the past. I think asking state, as I said, USAID has turned around on, you know, they've been very helpful now. I don't mean to criticize USAID, and that's in part because of letters from committees like this. You just need to break through with state.
So that's the crazy thing. I've worked with USAID. I've been over to Bangladesh, and I've seen Cox's Bazar, and I've seen the amazing work they've done. They do some amazing things.
They do.
Almost miraculous things.
They do.
What is the deal with the state? Why are they resisting accountability? Why is the Biden administration hiding instead of being transparent what they're trying to do? $1 million question.
You gotta ask them. You know, that's what I can say. I'm a former prosecutor, and I don't know if your background, you were a former prosecutor or defense attorney or whatever, but
I'm just a Marine, simple Marine.
just a Marine. Okay, when somebody, let's go use Shakespeare. He protesteth too much. I always wonder what motivates people. I mean, that's my personal opinion. This isn't an audit and all of that. My personal opinion is, same with yours. What are they trying to hide? I mean, is it worse than we have already uncovered? I don't know. I remember, I think it was Joe Dunford, another Marine, who I remember telling me, he says, you know, John, every time you come here, you uncover a rock and something ugly comes out. So how do we stop that? And he didn't try to stop me. He said, how do we stop it beforehand? And I created a program to try to do that. These are the type of questions, these are the type of things that we used to deal with the State Department and aid and state, and we used to help them to stop the ugly things from crawling out underneath the rocks. If you don't identify the problem, you're never going to fix it.
Amen.
And that's my concern.
Thank you. With that, I thank the witness for his valuable testimony and the members for their questions. The members of the committee may have some additional questions for the witness, and will ask you to respond to these in writing. Pursuant to the committee rules, all members may have 5 days to submit statements, questions, and extraneous materials for the record, subject to the length limitations. Without objection, the committee stands adjourned.